Hello everybody, this is Dartt, and yesterday there was a Legion developer Q&A featuring Craig Amai, who is the lead quest designer for World of Warcraft, blah 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 blah, sorry I can't talk, and it featured artifacts and class order halls. And let me start out by saying Blizzard really needs to work on some basic video editing skills. 20 minutes of nothing at the start of a video, that's a bit much. Okay, let's proceed with the questions that were asked during the Q&A, and I'm going to trim out a bunch of the fluff and just get to the meat of what was said, because there's a lot to go over, and I don't want to put you through an hour worth of mess like they do in that video. First of all, will class order halls change as new patches arrive? And the answer given was yes, there will be additional quest chains and content related to new content patches. Next, will there be more artifact appearances in later content patches, or at least color variations? And the answer was there will be a base appearance, one that's also available through an upgrade that's available through the class order hall, one from PvE, one from PvP, and hidden appearances, and that these will be available at launch. There will be another available later, at the very least, through a sort of challenge. So that's about all they said with that. I don't know what sort of challenge they're talking about, but my guess is it's probably some sort of PvE thing. There could be a PvP challenge as well. At this point, who knows? Next question. What's being done to allow artifact appearances to remain an option after Legion is over? And they said the intent is to create a method to allow players to keep those artifact appearances going forward, but they were going to introduce a cutoff so that they're only for people who played while Legion content was relevant. So, kind of like the Mists of Pandaria Cloak and the Warlords of Drana Ring, although it's not really sort of an appearance kind of thing, that's only going to be available while Legion is the relevant expansion. Will there be a way to respec your artifact tree at will, or to optimize until the full artifact tree, trait tree, say that 3 times fast, is realized? They said yes, but it will be very expensive, and not something that they necessarily expect you to do before each boss encounter. And also, there was some mention of a diminishing return effect, so if you do this over and over again, you're going to wind up losing artifact power, and you don't want that. Also, they stressed that it would be better just to go ahead and unlock all the artifact traits as opposed to trying to respec. Okay, big question here. How will artifact knowledge work, and how will it work over time? Especially the need to grind order hall resources regardless of when in the expansion you do the work orders. And they gave a huge answer to this. They start off by saying once you have your artifact weapon, all the content you participate in for Legion will grant artifact power. And you will use that to unlock new traits for your weapon. Every trait you purchase will cost a little bit more than the one before it. And this is especially true during the level up phase, from 101 to 110 or whatever. The first dozen or so trait purchases, the cost increase, they said, would be pretty close to negligible. As you hit maximum level, the trait cost will increase significantly. But around that same time, artifact knowledge will start building up, and that will increase the rate at which you gain artifact power. So that helps you keep up with the artifact trait costs. They said that's meant to help balance out progression across the player base, regardless of the time investment that people spend per week. They said that you'll be able to do class order hall missions that grant you a scroll or a book that give you artifact knowledge. And they said that these will cost varying degrees of resources to undertake, and that the resource costs will be balanced so that it forces you out into the world, but not so much that it becomes a huge chore. Artifact knowledge, they said, will cap at 25, whatever that arbitrary number means. I'm not quite sure. I haven't played the beta. And that it may increase with patches, but gaining artifact knowledge isn't something that you'll need to do for the whole expansion. So there's that light at the end of the tunnel. Artifact knowledge will be applicable for each character and not tied to a certain spec. So a huge bunch of information to digest there. How will artifact catch-up mechanics work for alts and alt specs? They said that, of course, alt specs will benefit from artifact knowledge. And if you want multiple specs maxed out, it will require probably 2 to 3 times the effort. If you enter the game later than the launch date, like alts, artifact knowledge missions will take proportionately less time to complete. So, let's say you start a second, third, etc., however many alts you have, each alt that you create is going to take significantly less time than the character you first started with. The third will take less time than the second will take less time than your main, sort of that sort of thing. Will artifact knowledge be an additive account-wide? No. It will not. It will be per character, no cumulative effect, and they said that they're trying to avoid rewarding character multiplicity. They want people to play alts for the experience of playing the alts, not because it's required to stay competitive in the end game. How long will it take, on average, to max out your first artifact? The answer they gave will probably be a few months, depending on the type of player and the time investment made towards that end. Why is there a balance difference between how you obtain certain hidden artifact skins? They said they didn't want the investment of time and effort to be equitable across all the hidden artifact skins. There's a huge variance in them, and that right now there are still skins that have yet to be discovered in the beta, and that the small cost skins, the ones that don't cost very much in terms of time, money, effort, whatever, were to appeal to player customization decisions. And they're not a huge difference, but they're enough to where people can kind of tailor their artifact appearance to whatever they want. Given that artifacts complete many specs, what is Blizzard doing to make sure 1 through 109 are smooth, balanced, and rewarding? I assume they mean levels there. Artifact powers, they said, will be good, but not necessarily game breakers if you don't have them. They said that they balanced and rebalanced things twice, once with the artifacts, once without, and that ultimately, at the end of the day, they wanted the leveling experience to be functional and fun with or without artifact powers. How will artifact appearances obtained from achievements such as raids, dungeons, archaeology, or whatever work? Will they be per character or account-wide? The majority of color variations will be per character. Some will be account-wide, but you would have to unlock a new model for the artifact weapon before the color variations for that model could be used, which kind of makes a little bit of sense. will artifacts be used as a tuning feature for class balance? They're kind of iffy on this. They said potentially maybe. It certainly wasn't designed that way, but it could be a tuning point for a given class. But if there is a change to be made, they would like the changes to be made at a logical level and not just a knee-jerk thing like, rogues are overpowered again, let's tune down their artifact. They said that wasn't necessarily going to be the case, that they wanted to address root problems and not just tune down artifacts as just sort of a way of weakening a class. Next question. Is there overlap between individual artifact quest lines? If you level all classes and specs, how much duplicate gameplay would there be? They said there'd be a little bit. Some classes and specs go to similar locations. Overall, the experiences should feel unique, and that order hall generation will also be unique. There's lots of variation in classes and specs, but yeah. If you're looking for a unique experience, chances are you're going to find it. They gave a couple of examples where some look like there was some overlap, but there's like 3 specs out of the however many there are. So, yeah. You'd have to really, really look or really get really, really unlucky for that sort of thing to happen. How will the lore for each artifact be explained in-game, and how will the newly introduced artifacts be elevated to the level of status and the established artifacts have? Basically, how are they going to story the newer artifacts to bring them up to the level of popularity that, say, Ashbringer and Doomhammer have? They said that they are going to introduce a history and a backstory for each new artifact, and also, as you unlock more traits and whatnot for your artifact, there's going to be a story associated with it that you'll be able to review and kind of read in game if you're into that sort of thing. They added that there's going to be a lot of game history and lore in Legion, and if they're adding that many artifacts, you'd certainly hope so. Holy Paladins have been using one-handers and shields for a long time. Why are they changing things to a two-handed mace with a book? They said they wanted to hark back to a classic look for the class, kind of like the fantasy of Uther with the big mace in the book, or the video of Murad wielding the big crystalline mace and studying his book for a little bit and then closing it. They kind of wanted to be true to what the class is advertised as. Will Tauren, Feral, and Guardian models have horns? Can we opt to use the new cat model via glyph or other model? They said when you gain the artifact appropriate to your spec for druids, you become the avatar of that specific druid deity, be it Ursoc or Ashamain. You won't be able to go back to prior druid models, but they like the idea, and it could be released down the road. What's going to happen with artifacts during Legion patches? Will there be more perks to spend artifact power on? They said there's some plans, but they want to see what happens with the final artifact stages among the player base before deciding what to do. Why are fist weapon artifacts invisible when sheathed? They said it was primarily for aesthetic reasons. They look pretty bulky and they don't really look good anywhere else on the character, so they're visible in content or in combat when they need to be, but they don't want you to look crappy out of combat. Okay, moving on. Why were most Order Hall teleports taken out of classes that didn't have something similar? They gave the example of Monk, Druid, and Death Knights. They said the intent was for people to be out in the world experiencing that content without the need or necessarily the ability to teleport out. They mentioned that Dalaran was supposed to be the central hub of the expansion, and that the Order Hall is actually going to be a side location apart from Dalaran, not a competing hub. And you will be able to go to Dalaran and then to the Order Hall and back. Will additional famous NPCs show up in the Order Hall during quests or patches? And they made the statement that the Warrior Order Hall was missing some very famous NPCs. Craig said they might introduce more, but more likely you'll see more story for existing NPCs. He also mentioned that warriors were a special case. In Alpha, there were ghosts of warrior heroes, but fantasy being considered, the idea of a Hall of Heroes just simply was unworkable due to the factioning constraints. They had orc ghosts and human ghosts, just as an example, that just would not be in the same room with each other without trying to strangle each other. So things just did not go that way. And they went with a more Vrykul sort of fantasy rather than have irreconcilable heroes standing around an Order Hall. What's the reason for limiting the number of Order Hall champions to 6? They said mainly player customization. They want the choices that you make to be compelling and for them to be people you care about. They don't want people to have like 30 or 40, however many followers running around. They just want to limit to something reasonable. Will there be a transmog NPC in Order Halls? Can we redo talents while in them? Do class Order Halls give rested bonus? It said no transmog in Order Halls, although rested bonus, yes, and talent respects, yes to that as well. What's the reasoning behind trade chat being accessible within class Order Halls? The statement was made that they still want the Order Halls to be a social location, and they don't want people missing out on what's going on in the world while they're in the Order Hall, and that they have plenty of other reasons for people to visit cities, most notably Dalaran. So it's really not a worry. They're not worried about people shacking up in their Order Hall and never coming out like they did in Warlords with their garrisons. Why was Marksman given a bow and Beast Mastery a gun? They said there's strong opinions on both sides where, say, the racial fantasy of Night Elves was to have a bow, but Gnomes and Goblins would look better with guns or whatever. But really, for the most part, it was an individual decision. And they tried to introduce options with artifact appearances and transmog as well. So if you really just don't like the fact that your marksman hunter is going to have a bow, you can always transmog it to a gun. If there is a big change to artifact trait trees, will free respecs be allowed? And the statement was that they wanted to avoid trait changes to that degree at all costs. They want to leave artifact traits alone as much as possible, and their thought is that eventually players will max their artifacts and that shouldn't even be necessary. Will artifact power progression, similar to item level, be a requirement to access content? how important will artifact power become in pre-made groups. And they said openly there will be no artifact power gating in Legion content. There will be item level requirements, and that will continue. For pre-mades, you really can't predict. I mean, it's kind of up to the player base. They're hoping it won't be a huge factor, but it'd be very hard to do because you won't be able to inspect someone else's artifacts. Is Acheris going to be used as a Death Knight base, or will it continue to be just Runeforge and training dummies? Acheris will have a lot more content that takes place there now, and it's going to have a much larger role. So, yes, Acheris will be the Death Knight Order Hall. How did you choose artifact weapons and class halls for all specs? For order halls, it was pretty much what represented the class, and they were trying not to play towards one faction or the other, either the Alliance or the Horde. For weapons, they wanted something that stood out, something that had a lot of history, and either that or it was associated with a significant hero or a place in the world. And that's pretty much it for the Q&A. I want to know what you think. Please feel free to leave me questions in the comments below, like if you found this informative, and hit that subscribe button if you haven't. As always, I'm Dartt. Good luck and have fun.